Steelers Nation. Right from the opening snap of that replay, you can feel how different this win in Baltimore really was. Not because the Steelers suddenly transformed into a flawless team, but because this locker room walked into a hostile stadium with all the noise of the past month sitting on their backs and still found a way to take control of the AFC North again. And when you look closely at everything that unfolded, from Mike Tomlin's tempered reaction to Aaron Rodgers firing back at the media, to what Adam Thielen and Marquez Valdes-Scantling actually meant this week, it becomes clear this game wasn't just another chapter in the season. It was a pivot point, maybe even a pulse check for a team trying to rediscover itself with only 4 games left. After watching the tape and listening to the post-game pressers, the contrast between Tomlin and Rodgers was striking. Tomlin kept things calm, almost intentionally steady, highlighting effort but refusing to let this team ignore the problems still hanging around their ankles. He didn't walk in smiling. He didn't pound his chest. He treated this win like a stepping stone, not a statement. But Rodgers, he let it rip. His "maybe you guys will shut the hell up for a week" shot toward the media said everything about how personal the last 7 games have felt for this roster. 5 losses and 7 tries will do that to a locker room. And Rodgers made it clear the criticism wasn't just heard, it was absorbed. And then came the quote that everyone's going to be talking about all week, when Rodgers said the additions of Adam Thielen and MVS brought a different level of professionalism. He was careful to praise Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson, but the message was obvious. Preparation needed to change. Focus needed to change, and having 2 veterans who've lived in this league for years evidently shifted the tone in the building. The funny thing is that the box score won't show any of that. Thielen had 1 4-yard catch, MVS didn't have one at all. Their presence wasn't about yards, it was about seriousness, about sharpening the room. Meanwhile, the young guys are still inconsistent. Calvin Austin delivered a gorgeous downfield grab, but Roman Wilson didn't even get a helmet, a healthy scratch behind Scotty Miller, a move that has so many fans shaking their heads. And honestly, after seeing the tape again, I get it. It's hard not to feel like that decision says something bigger about how the staff sees Roman's development right now. But if the receivers brought the professionalism Rodgers talked about, the offensive line brought something even more important: protection. And that's been a rare sentence to type this season, considering they were without Calvin Anderson and Broderick Jones, and then lost Andrew Peat. The way this reshuffled front kept Rodgers clean was borderline shocking. Rodgers has barely had time to breathe in recent weeks, let alone extend plays and attack downfield. But this time, the pocket was stable, and when the pocket is stable, you get a quarterback who looks far more like the one you traded for. The problem is the run blocking still isn't there, and in the 4th quarter, when the entire stadium knew Pittsburgh needed to close out the game, the offense completely collapsed. 3 yards in the final 15 minutes. That's the kind of thing that gets you beaten in January. That's the kind of thing this coaching staff must fix immediately. And yes, the Roman Wilson decision lingers over everything. You bench a 3rd-round pick who's been a starter, showing real promise, to elevate a veteran who barely saw the field. It feels like a move that could impact confidence, future plans, maybe even roster decisions in the offseason. Roman hasn't been perfect. Yes, he's run some wrong routes. Yes, Rodgers has been frustrated, but he's also been open, he's also flashed, and he's certainly been more impactful than Scotty Miller. Moves like this can't be made lightly, especially when a player is trying to carve out his future in this league. Then you flip the field, and the defense tells a completely different story. They gave up yards, sure, but in the red zone they were a wall. 2 touchdowns allowed on 6 trips is often the difference between a win and a long, angry plane ride home. They pressured Lamar Jackson at key moments and made the exact stops needed when everything tightened. And Alex Highsmith, he played one of his best games of the season, even while nursing an ankle issue, TFLs, QB hits, and the game-sealing sack. For a guy fans often underrate or label as injury-prone, this was a reminder of how valuable he still is to this defense. All of it, the offensive spark, the 4th quarter stall, the red zone stands, the comments from Rodgers, the decisions from Tomlin, swirls into one bigger question as the Steelers move into the final 4 games of the season, sitting at 7-6 and back atop the AFC North. Because this wasn't a perfect win. It wasn't a dominant win, but it was a gutsy one, a revealing one, the kind that exposes both strengths and flaws at the exact moment the playoff picture starts tightening. So here's what I want to know from you. After everything that came out of this game, from the lineup decisions to the offensive surge to the defensive stand, what do you, the fans, think this win really says about the direction of the Pittsburgh Steelers? Continuing from exactly where we left off, this is where the conversation with Steelers fans gets even more interesting, because once you zoom out from the emotional weight of that win, you start to see how many layers are shaping the path toward the final stretch of the season. And honestly, the rest of the league did Pittsburgh a few favors on Sunday. When you consider how chaotic the AFC picture became, you start to understand why this victory in Baltimore feels even more important than it looked in the moment. The Bengals blowing that fourth-quarter lead to Buffalo felt like the most unexpected assist of the day. Cincinnati had a chance to keep themselves alive, to make the North a true three-team race, and instead they coughed it up and essentially removed themselves from contention. That loss means the Steelers, at 7 wins, now hold the inside track as long as they play .500 football down the stretch. 2 wins in the final 4 games. That's it. It's no guarantee, but it's far more manageable than the mess this team would have faced had the Bengals closed things out. And with Baltimore stumbling in their own slate toughening, it suddenly feels like the door is open wider than anyone expected 2 weeks ago. But the wildest part is what's happening beneath the playoff line, where quarterbacks are reshaping the field every single week. Shatter Sanders playing well for Cleveland, even in a loss, creates a ripple effect that directly touches Pittsburgh's future. The Steelers need teams like the Browns to hesitate on drafting a quarterback next year. They need uncertainty, competition, or even false optimism in those rival rooms. If Sanders and Deshaun Watson spend the rest of the year locked in a quiet battle for next season's starting job, that's a win for Pittsburgh's long-term footing, even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment. Then you look at New Orleans. Tyler Shuck isn't just keeping them alive, he's making them rethink their entire offseason plan. If he continues to look like the real deal, that's one more team crossing QB in the first round off its list. And once again, that matters to the Steelers. If this team decides after the season that they want to invest in a young passer, whether Rodgers stays for one more year or not, they need as few competitors as possible in that draft race. Shuck's emergence helps. And then comes the Colts situation, which might be the most unpredictable storyline of the week. Daniel Jones tearing his Achilles puts Indianapolis in quarterback chaos again, and suddenly they're staring at a playoff push with no viable starter. Whether they dial up Taylor Heineke, make a surprise call to Derek Carr, or even try to push Anthony Richardson back on the field, their stability is gone. Their schedule is brutal, and that impacts the wild card race directly. If the Colts slide out of contention, that opens the door for teams sitting behind the line, including Pittsburgh if things get tight late. But all of this chaos leads to the matchup sitting right in front of the Steelers, Monday Night Football against the Miami Dolphins. And the biggest storyline emerging from that game is Devin Achane's rib injury. Even if he plays, he won't be operating at full explosiveness, and that matters for a Steelers defense that has been gashed repeatedly by speed backs. Without Derek Harmon in the middle, Pittsburgh has struggled with perimeter runs, misdirection, and outside zone. If Achane is limited, or if Miami decides to protect him and sit him entirely, that changes the geometry of the game. Suddenly the burden shifts onto Tua and the passing attack, and in cold weather, in prime time, against a pass rush that just showed signs of life, that's exactly the kind of matchup Pittsburgh needs. And this is the part fans need to hold on to. Everything about this playoff run is still in front of this team. They haven't peaked. They haven't put together a complete game. They haven't solved the run-blocking issues or the fourth-quarter stagnation. They haven't settled the wide receiver rotation. But they showed fight, they showed structure, and they bought themselves a path forward when many thought the season was ready to unravel. The things they still need to fix are real, and they're urgent, but the opportunity is bigger than it's been in weeks. So here's the question as we close this out. With the AFC picture shifting, injuries stacking up across the conference, and another massive primetime stage ahead, what do you think this win truly sets up for Pittsburgh's season? And when you look at how this team has responded to pressure all season, you start realizing that this next stretch isn't just about playoff seeding or division control. It's about identity, because for weeks, the Steelers have been stuck in a cycle of inconsistency, great defensive moments paired with brutal lapses, flashes of offensive rhythm immediately followed by drives that look disconnected, disjointed, or flat-out hesitant. And yet, when this group walked into Baltimore, a place where plenty of Steelers teams have fallen apart under tension, they showed something we haven't seen enough of this year: resilience with purpose. That's why the conversations in the locker room after the game were so revealing. You could sense it in Rodgers' tone, in the way veterans carried themselves, even in how younger guys talked about preparation. This wasn't a group celebrating an upset. This was a group acting like they expected to win. And that mindset matters heading into games where the margin for error shrinks dramatically. What's also becoming clear is that every personnel decision from this point forward will matter more than ever. The Roman Wilson situation is a perfect example. Whether fans agree or not, the the coaching staff made a statement by sitting him. And in the NFL, when coaches make statements this late in the season, it's rarely just about 1 week. Rodgers' comments about professionalism only add to the tension around that decision. It forces the question, is this really about development, or is it about trust? And if trust is the issue, who earns it back first? The veteran who knows the system, or the young receiver who flashes upside but still makes timing mistakes? That's the kind of internal storyline that defines a team during a playoff push. It's not just about who plays well, it's about who the quarterback believes in, who the head coach trusts, and who can handle the pressure without breaking. And speaking of pressure, the defense is about to face one of the biggest challenges of the season in Miami. Not because the Dolphins are unbeatable, but because they force you to defend width and speed better than almost anyone in football. If the Steelers pursued angles, edge discipline, or tackling technique slip even slightly, Miami will punish every inch of that. That's why a chains rib situation is such a major factor. A limited version of him changes how Miami structures their offense. It changes motion usage, formation spacing, and even their tempo. And Pittsburgh needs every one of those small advantages. But the biggest opportunity lies with the pass rush. This is the type of matchup Highsmith, Watt, and Herbig feast on when they get rolling early. Tua thrives on timing. Disrupt that timing, and suddenly his entire game shifts. Pittsburgh doesn't need 5 sacks. They just need to take away his first read and force him to reset the play. If they do that consistently, they can drag Miami into the kind of gritty, narrow game the Steelers thrive in. It's strange, isn't it? A team that spent a month struggling to find answers now stands at the center of one of the tightest playoff races in the AFC, holding the kind of momentum that could flip the narrative of their entire season. They didn't fix everything in Baltimore. They didn't erase the flaws, but they proved they're still in the fight, and that they still have enough talent, enough leadership, and enough fire to punch their way through December if they take the right steps. So now I want to know from you, with everything tightening around the AFC, with Miami on deck, and with this team showing both progress and real room for growth, what do you think Pittsburgh absolutely must improve first if they want to finish this playoff push strong? And when you stack all these moving pieces together, you start to see why this stretch run feels so tense, so unpredictable, and yet so strangely promising. Because for all the flaws this team has shown, there's a pattern forming. In the biggest moments, when the season feels like it's teetering, someone steps up. Against Baltimore, it was Alex Highsmith wreaking havoc when it felt like the Ravens were finally gaining momentum. It was DK Metcalf breaking loose downfield after weeks of defensive coordinators suffocating him. It was the offensive line, patched together, reshuffled, and criticized, giving Aaron Rodgers the cleanest pockets he's had in over a month. These aren't small signs. These are the kinds of clues that tell you a team isn't folding, that it actually might be trending upward at exactly the right time, even if the climb has been messy. But there's another side to this story, and Steelers fans see it clearly. The fourth quarter collapse on offense can't be ignored. 3 yards. 3. In a rivalry game, on the road, with the AFC North on the line. That's the kind of stretch that gets you bounced out of the postseason before you even have a chance to settle in. Rodgers said afterward that the professionalism from the veteran receivers helped the preparation this week, but preparation doesn't mean much if execution falls apart when the game slows down and every play becomes a chess match. That's where this team still has to grow. That's the difference between a gritty, survival mode win and a confident, complete one. And the Steelers haven't had many of those complete wins. Not this year. They've been carried for stretches by the defense. They've leaned on Rodgers to create sparks. They've needed moments of brilliance instead of full game control. If they want to make noise in January, that has to change. And it starts with the rhythm of this offense in the final quarter of games. The truth is, Pittsburgh can't survive on almost anymore. Not with Miami coming. Not with the playoff picture tightening. Not with the decisions this coaching staff has already made at wide receiver. Decisions that carry long-term implications whether they admit it or not. When Roman Wilson loses his helmet spot to Scotty Miller, you're not just adjusting snaps. You're shifting the developmental arc of a player who was supposed to be part of the future identity of this offense. And when a team starts making choices like that, it signals how close they believe they are to contention right now. They're not thinking about what Roman might be in 2026. They're thinking about what Rodgers wants in Week 15. And maybe that's the reality of this moment. Maybe this team understands that windows in the NFL are fragile and short, and that you don't get many years with a quarterback like Rodgers. It forces urgency. It forces tough calls. It forces coaches to live with veterans who might not have the same upside as a young player but offer something much harder to quantify. Trust. And trust is everything when you're chasing a division. But here's the part where fans can legitimately lean into optimism. The AFC is not dominant this year. The path is not blocked by unbeatable teams. The Bills are surging but flawed. New England is physical but limited. The Colts are collapsing at quarterback. The wild card race is a logjam of teams that can't string together consistency. This is the kind of year where a team like Pittsburgh, battle-tested, imperfect, and constantly grinding out close games, can get hot at the right time and become a problem for anyone. They just need to fix the fourth quarter offense. They need to settle the wide receiver rotation. They need to keep Rodgers clean. And they need to tighten their run fits so they're not giving away free yards to running backs like we saw today, like we saw last week, and like we've seen all year. Because if they clean up even two of those areas, this team is capable of winning multiple games in January. They've already beaten some of the toughest opponents on their schedule. They've already shown they can respond under pressure. And when you combine that with Rodgers' fire, Tomlin's calculated steady hand, and the talent on this roster, you're looking at a team that could shock people if they find their rhythm at the right time. Now here's what I want to hear from you as we push toward the next chapter of this story. With all the context of this win, all the shifting pieces around the AFC, and the massive Monday night showdown ahead, what do you think the Steelers' biggest advantage is heading into these final 4 games? And as you peel back even more layers of what this win means, you start noticing how the emotional temperature of this team has shifted. Earlier in the season, every mistake felt heavy. Every dropped pass, every busted blocking assignment, every missed tackle seemed to carry the weight of the entire year. The body language on the sideline reflected frustration, not belief. But in Baltimore, even when the defense bent, even when the offense sputtered late, the sideline never splintered. The communication never cracked. The composure stayed intact all the way through that final Highsmith sack. That matters more than people realize, because teams that unravel in December don't survive January. Teams that stay tight, stay accountable, stay aggressive when everything feels like it's slipping, those are the teams that make runs nobody expects. But the most revealing part of this game might be how the Steelers responded to the Ravens' adjustments. Baltimore came out in the second half determined to test the Steelers' defensive discipline, especially on the edges. They used misdirection, motion, and speed, exactly the combination that has gashed Pittsburgh multiple times this season. And yes, they got their chunk plays. They moved the ball. They pushed the Steelers into uncomfortable spots. But when they got inside the 20, when the field shrank and instincts had to take over, the Steelers tightened. Situational defense is the difference between surviving and collapsing, and Pittsburgh's red zone performance is the reason they control the AFC North tonight instead of sitting behind Baltimore needing help. That's why Monday night against Miami becomes such a defining moment. Everything the Steelers struggled with today, perimeter runs, explosive speed, delayed blocking schemes, is exactly what the Dolphins weaponize. And if Devin Achane isn't fully healthy, or if Miami has to alter its approach even slightly because of that rib injury, Pittsburgh gains an opening to dictate terms rather than chase the game. The Dolphins don't just rely on speed, they rely on timing, rhythm, and flow. If Tua has to shoulder the entire offense without a fully explosive Achane behind him, it becomes easier for the Steelers to disrupt that flow and push Miami into a style of game they hate: slow, physical, compressed, muddy. And that's where the Steelers win. That's who they've always been when they win. One of the most underrated storylines of this season is how often the Steelers have been dragged